What's up, everybody? Matt Gajewski here, back again with the Awesemo team, talking some college football DFS. It is Thursday, November the 4th, and we have a single game slate. Georgia State taking on Louisiana Lafayette. Everything you need to know for this showdown contest. But before we get started, hit that thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you know when this and all other content goes live. Bringing you behind the glass. Here is our player usage tool, where you can see all kinds of opportunity statistics for these players. We also have projections, ownership projections, everything you need to take advantage of college football DFS. And getting into tonight's game, Georgia State taking on Louisiana Lafayette. It is a 13-point spread in favor of the Ragin' Cajuns, a 53.5-point total overall. But we start with the Georgia State side, where we have a very run-heavy team, just a 38% pass rate, but a team playing at a slightly above average pace. 71.4 plays per game for Georgia State. Now, they had a quarterback change this year. They move on for Cornelius Brown, who's now in the transfer portal, and they move forward with freshman Darren Granger, who is elite in terms of his dual threat ability. He already has 403 yards on the ground this year. Lacks a little bit as a passer, but again, this is never going to be the pass-heaviest offense in football, and it is nice that Granger is involved on the ground. He has a lot of upside just purely coming through his legs. He's a very strong captain play, and he's also going to be used a lot in the utility. It's going to be really hard to avoid him, especially with Louisiana Lafayette's primary weakness on defense coming against the run. They allow 153 yards to opponents, so Granger certainly capitalizes on that. In the true run game, we also had Destin Coates transfer that has allowed Tucker Gregg and Jameis Williams to basically form a 1-2 committee at running back. Gregg has been more active overall in the run game. He averages 12.3 touches to Williams' 8 touches per game overall, but we have seen this be a pretty even timeshare overall, and there's not going to be a lot separating them. In terms of who's more active in the pass game, it's Gregg, albeit very slight. They don't really use a pure pass catching back. They are just 2 targets for Gregg, and then you see the 1 target for Jameis Williams this year. So it is very much these guys have to get it done on the ground. They're a little bit expensive, but I think you can certainly play them in tournaments. And as far as price-adjusted plays, Williams is a little bit better on DraftKings, and then you have Gregg coming in just slightly more expensive than Williams on FanDuel. That's where I would lean. In the receiver room, we've seen this change a little bit. Cornelius Mccoy hasn't played in 3 straight games. He hasn't really had his status updated. I would find it surprising if he played, but watch Cornelius McCoy. He is a very important piece of this offense when he's active. We just haven't seen it in a while. And without him, we've seen Sam Pinckney option as one of the best options this team has. He's playing a ton of snaps and he's running a lot of routes. And he's actually moved ahead of Jamari Thrash in recent weeks. So this is a spot where maybe you just buy Pinckney at a very cheap price. He's somebody that I am going to be taking a long look at tonight just based on his opportunity compared to Thrash overall. And looking at their routes run, he's been the only player above 80% of the routes in the last 2 weeks. So this is very important to me. Outside of him, you have Terrence Dixon and Josias Credle, both around 60% of the routes in the last 2 weeks. So Credle's actually led the team in targets in their last 4 games. So he's another player to have your eye on. He's also very cheap. Dixon's a little more expensive, and he actually has the fewest targets among the top 4. We'll talk about Thrash in a second. So Dixon, he comes in a little bit overpriced. And then the aforementioned Jamari Thrash, he's just seen his role reduced a lot this year. In the first game, he played on 100% of the snaps. Then that went to 65, 77. And since then, he hasn't eclipsed 56% of any of the routes in their last 5 games. So Thrash has become more of a timeshare player, but he's still seen targets. He's tied with Sam Pinckney for the second most over their last 4 games. So he needs to be considered. It's just a matter of, am I paying the same target volume for Pinckney, who's much, much cheaper? Am I paying the same target volume for Thrash as I am for Pinckney when Pinckney comes in much cheaper? So that's kind of my philosophy there. Thrash is used more downfield, so you do have that in his back pocket, but still, he's expensive for his price is what I'm getting at. And from there, you also have Georgia State using a couple tight ends, which can be a little bit confusing here. But Aubrey Payne and Roger Carter, they're both on the field about 50% of the time. Aubrey Payne has been targeted a lot more of late. He has 3.3 targets over the last 4 games, 12 targets combined in the last 3 compared to just 6 for Carter. He's a little bit expensive as well. I would rather play one of the cheaper receivers than Aubrey Payne just based on target volume, but he needs to be considered. The same goes for Roger Carter. On Louisiana Lafayette, Levi Lewis is a game manager, but they have the much higher implied team total here. He's somewhat mobile with 207 rushing yards on the year, more active as a passer than the Georgia State quarterback, but he's still just game manager territory. 28 attempts per game is not going to get it done typically, but again, it's a showdown slate, so he's very much in play based on reduced opportunities at other positions. Levi Lewis, I think he's a good cash play for sure and viable in tournaments. As we'll get to, he's a little bit harder to stack. In the run game, Amani Bailey will miss this contest again. Chris Smith and Montrell Johnson have been the two clear lead rushers here. And I think it's a spot where you can play them both. And overall, this price, it looks like it's recorded the Navy Chris Smith. So I'll adjust this, but Chris Smith is still more expensive. Overall, excuse me, he's more expensive than 3K, but they're very good plays overall based on just their matchup. Georgia State allows 170 yards per game to opposing rushers. And we are looking at a situation where this should be split a little closer to just a 1-for-1 timeshare. So that's a spot where I'm definitely interested in both Chris Smith and Montrell Johnson. Again, Chris Smith, he's not 3,000, he's 15,000 in the captain spot. So I'll update this later. You do have to pay for him, but he could be worth it. Johnson's the better price adjusted play overall. And then without Amani Bailey, they used a bit of a committee between TJ Wisham and Terrence Williams. I will say all of Wisham's carries came on the final drive of the game. So if I'm punting off with a third Louisiana Lafayette back, it's going to be Terrence Williams. And they have used three backs consistently through the year. So he is a worthwhile punt at the stone minimum. For the receivers, Louisiana Lafayette uses about 7 players, and it's really difficult to take advantage of this. The only player who's even close to 50% of the routes consistently is Kyron Lacey. He's also 8,700. So would you rather pay for one of the cheaper Georgia State receivers? I personally would. The wide receiver 2 is Peter LeBlanc. He is a much better price, but still averaging just 3.5 targets per game. He's at a better price point, but again, really hard to stack this Lafayette team. And then from there, we have Dante Fleming, John Stevens, Jalen Williams, Michael Jefferson, Errol Rogers, even like Neil Smith coming in at tight end. Very active here. Errol Rogers has some upside because he's been hurt at periods of time this year. But ultimately, it comes down to these Louisiana Lafayette receivers are very, very volatile. If I'm trying to make a preference or a list between them, it's Lacey 1, LeBlanc 2, and then from there, I'm just trying to play the cheapest options because the volume is very much the same between them all. But like even price adjusted, I prefer LeBlanc over Lacey because that price is so drastically different. But it's a tough showdown slate. There's a lot of options on both sides. Ultimately, I'll be looking heavily at the Levi Lewis, the Chris Smith, the Montrell Johnsons, Terrence Williams for GPPs, and pass catchers for GPPs on Lafayette. And then trying to get the cheaper receivers on Georgia State, the Pinkneys, the Kreddles, and then using Granger as the dual threat. But thank you guys for watching. That will do it for us today. Let me know in the comment section who your favorite play is for this showdown slate. Otherwise, I'm Matt Gajewski on Twitter at Matt_Gajewski. We will see you guys again next time.